And good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Mondays. It is a delight once again to be here with you on this glorious, wet and drizzly Monday evening here in the UK. I hope the weather is better where you are. Because it's been a funny day, actually. It was misty to start with, then the sun came out. Then it rained, then the sun came out, then it rained. Then the mist came back, then it rained, then the sun came out, then it rained, then the sun went down, and then it rained. And I'm very British because I'm talking about the weather, but there we go. And the Wafflemeister is in the house. Yes, I am. The Wafflemeister is back. It's Monday, and I always start by waffling. In fact, I don't usually stop waffling, I think. So I've been told many times, but there we are. It is good. Anyway, welcome one and welcome all. And first things first, please, no spoilers for June, all right? June is off topic, okay? Rigorously off topic, because I won't get to see it until next Saturday, or next Sunday, I think it is. So no June spoilers, all right? Other than I know obviously what the story of June is because I read it and I watched the old '84 version, but nothing about the new film, please, if that's all right. So thank you very much. Anyway, Nim Duskrin is here, Commander JR19 is here, Dantech Nick is here, Commander Derekov is here, Winnie 1974 is here, Wintermute is here, the Shadow Wyvern is here as well. Go out, the Glenn Terrafaber is here, and Silius is here, Gigi is here, and Stephen Corris is here as well. Welcome one and welcome all. June is awesome, and that is all I have to say. Excellent. Well, if it passes your critiquing eye, Glenn, then I'm good. It's yeah. I mean, it's yeah. They couldn't afford it not to be great, could they? So I'm looking forward to that. I'm actually going to watch the original 1984 version on Saturday night before on Sunday night I go and watch the new one, so I can kind of compare and contrast. Because I haven't watched the '84 one since probably sometime in the 90s. So I'm looking forward to that, and I did read the book probably about 3 years ago, so it's reasonably fresh in my brain. So there we go. So there's the weather forecast out the way. Yes, that's very, very British approach to things. Dear. So I haven't seen it yet, and due to the complexities of the Wagar household, which are great. Often very complicated. Next weekend is the earliest I could get to see it, but there we go. Never mind. So yes, at some point, I mean, we'll have to let everybody have a chance to catch up. Those who are interested, because it'll be interesting to see what they've made of it, and how they've kind of moved it on, you know, narratively and special effects wise, obviously since previous movies. So. I remember rather enjoying the '84 version. It'd be interesting to see what it looks like after all these years, and I wanted to see it before the current one because. You know, special effects have moved on a little bit, haven't they, since 1984. So never mind. Complicated complexities. Yes, well, actually, we've had some good news today. My youngest son has passed his driving test today, which A is making me feel a little bit old, but it's a good thing because now he is. Now I am freed from dad taxi duty. Yes, this is a good thing. Not that I mind really, but it's just the amount of time it takes up. He now has his own. He has passed his driving test, and he has his own car. The only thing I have to do is pay for the insurance and petrol, which is pretty damn outrageous. But you know, it's better than time. So anyway, so that's good. So both my sons are now moving into their era of independence, which is an interesting place to be as a parent, actually, because half of you's going to miss them, and the other half is just leaving home. But we have, I must have a really good relationship with both of my sons. So only yesterday, actually, we're all huddled around my this old laptop that I put together to play old games. We found a copy of Micro Machines version 4, and we spent a good 2 hours just absolute laughter and wheezes just playing Micro Machines, which was a great game. So it's all good. It's all good. But time moves on, doesn't it? I remember passing my driving test a long time ago, but it doesn't seem that long ago. And yet it is quite a long time ago. I passed my driving test in 1989, I think. That's a long time ago. So the MX-5 is no. I get to know the MX-5 is way too difficult for any of my youngsters to currently insure because it's highly modified. So that's one of the only good things about being old is that insurance is relatively cheap. So my son has a very small engined little car which isn't very intimidating at all, but it'll get him around for a few years hopefully. So that's good. So yeah, there has been great progress, and there has been great rejoicing in the Wagar household today. And we'll probably go out for a nice celebratory meal on Saturday to enjoy that. So that's been good. Had fun and games on the weekend. Went to see Back to the Future the musical. Bum, 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 da, da, dun, 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 dun. Such a great theme tune, that one. And that was really good. So I don't know if that's only a London thing at the moment, or whether it's around elsewhere in the world. But if it is elsewhere in the world, I recommend you go and see it if you like. Obviously, Back to the Future. It's a classic. It's a fantastic story. I think it's exceedingly well written. Actually, Back to the Future, because it's got a lot of character style cliches, but they work exceptionally well. The rough and ready teenager with a girlfriend, the mad professor, all the other supporting cast, the bully, the school teacher, etc., etc., etc. It's a perfect little gem of a 1980s story, and as a musical, it works surprisingly well. Okay, having watched it now, it's my favourite. There's a very minor spoilers for the musical version. There's a scene, when they're obviously for those of you who know the film, when they're in Twin Pines Mall at the beginning, and Doc is preparing the time machine for its first kind of jaunt into the past, and there's this brilliant scene where he basically goes, "You built a time machine out of a DeLorean?" And Doc's go, yeah, I built a time machine out of a DeLorean. And then there's this musical number that starts again. They start singing about time and the DeLorean and stuff like this. And of course, because it's a musical, all these dancing girls appear spinning around in shimmery latexy kind of stuff. There's this moment in the musical where the music pauses, all the girls freeze, and Doc goes to Marty, "Where do all these girls come from?" And Doc just goes, "I have no idea, they just appear every time I start singing." And then instantly there's a beat and they all got moving around again. And the whole thing is full of stuff like that. It's really, 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 really well done. So I really enjoyed it. I thought it was excellently put together, and a real good sort of homage to the obviously the '85 movie. So it's just the kind of fourth wall. Where are all these girls coming from? I have no idea. It was fantastic. So it was all good. So so there we go. Right. So. Yeah, it doesn't take itself seriously. That's good. It's just pure unadulterated fun. That's quite good. If I may interject waffle time with a bit of writerly news. Ooh. If any UKers are within spitting distance of the London Borough of Havering, I'm going to be doing my first ever author talk on the 25th of November at Rainham Library, and I'm absolutely terrified. Would be great to have an audience. Oh, I'll send that to me on email or Twitter or something, JL1988, and I will. If I can make it, I will pop up and jeer from the back. No, he doesn't. That's too rubbish. That's not true at all. Oh no, he doesn't. No, I wouldn't do that. Yeah, no, let me know if it's London's accessible for me, so it'd be good. Good to have a chat. We could do a writerly thing and go for a beer or something. We'll see how it goes, but so yeah. Well, best of luck with that, even if we aren't able to get it. So that'd be awesome. Wow, that'd be really, really good. So that was good. So yes, driving test, Back to the Future. What else has happened? Oh, of course, I have Cling from Dru. I'll have to think of something now. I should just wear my hat. That'll put you off. I should just bob around at the back. Maybe with some flashing lights or something. We'll need to see photos. Yes. Well, send me a ping about that, because I'll forget after this evening because I can't record the chat. But GL98, send me a ping on Twitter or Facebook or something, and we'll see what we can do. That'd be cool. So yeah, the other thing I did, I got the novel cover for my latest book, Doom Dark's Revenge. So that came through last week as well. So there was a flurry of activity getting that sorted out. So that's now a commissioned piece of art which we had done for the book. That's been sent off to the publisher. So all that is in process of going through the works. The editors are now going through my document as well. So that's quite good. And today, I actually got to a point with my sort of day-to-day work where I was waiting for emails and meetings from everybody else, and I got stuck. I had nothing else to do. So I actually got back to some of my writing, which was really good. So I have today plotted out book 1 of my next sci-fi series, the Higara series. So I'm really rather pleased about that, because that's kind of got me kind of, I can do that. So it's all very exciting. So I've got book 1 plotted out, book 1 of I think 4. It's still rough, but I felt like it's coming together, and I've got all the character names sorted out. So I went through and started getting inspired by some of the characters in the book. So I've now got a cast of probably 13 or so characters, with probably 6 or 7 of them being kind of major ones so far in the book. So that's all kind of positive stuff. So I feel like I've been very creative today, which has been a nice feeling. So that's all good. So the first book is sort of plotted. It's not perfect because it's basically only the main plot. I haven't put the subplots in, and I haven't put the background shenanigans and all that sort of stuff in, because I want to get the main bit to work. The main adventure, if you like, of the book is in. So then I just need to kind of wrap around some of the other stuff. But I've got a huge, enormous spreadsheet now, which is full of lore, which is good. I've got the entire timeline of the history of my universe, the Shayward universe, from today basically all the way to the year 5000 AD, which has taken a bit of time to get right. So I've got that kind of all pegged together. And there's wars, and there's stuff going on, and all sorts of interesting things. So have I got the character I'm going to pick on the most? Yes. I have worked that out. So it's not going to be Maru. Maru's had enough, obviously. So there will be another character that gets picked on. So there we go. I think I get myself lost in the smaller bits, but I should focus on the big. Yeah. So I've kind of done the outlines. What I tend to do is I work out, okay, what's the main thrust of the story? What's the key? What's the main loop of the story? What happens in this book from beginning to end? The kind of beginning, the middle section, and then the kind of resolution bit towards the end. I kind of work that bit out, and then go, okay, what else do I want to layer in around this? And which little mysteries do I want to allude to, and which clues do I want to give to later books in the early book, and all those kind of things. So that's beginning to come together. Is his name Maru? No. It might not even be a he this time. Maybe it's going to be a girl, or I don't know. Let's find out. Maybe it's going to be an alien. Maybe it's going to be a robot. Maybe it's going to be an AI. Dun dun dun. Winnie 1974. By the way, lived the end of Shayward. I hope you didn't. Oh, loved the end of Shayward. I was going to say, you lived the end of Shayward. You poor soul, you. You loved it. Oh, that's good. You wrapped that story up brilliant. Well, it was fun to wrap Shayward up. A sandworm, it could be mean to a sandworm. I don't think I'll do sandworm somehow. I think that might have been done. What you said with regards to Shayward. So yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed the ending. It was a bittersweet thing to write. The funny thing was, of course, that I had plotted that ending back in 2012, 2013, when I worked out the entire plot for Shayward from beginning to end, because that's how I work. Okay, so I knew what was going to happen. What was going to happen to Zoella, what was going to happen to Kiri, what was going to happen to Maru, and all the others. In the Shayward saga. So I knew that way back then. I just hadn't written it. And obviously didn't write Shayward 4 until a few years ago, and actually turned into the actual story. So in some ways, for me, it was less of a heart wrench, because I'd been prepped for it. At the end of the story for a long time. And what I've had back from Shayward 4 is A, that I did wrap it up well, but B was kind of like true. It is a story. So there we go. Drew, apologies if I drag you off topic. Will you be seeing Dune? Right, okay, we've already declared a moratorium on Dune because I will be seeing it, but next Sunday, okay? So we're not allowed to talk about Dune. We will, at some point in the future, but not today. If that's okay. So there we go. So Maru had a fitting end. Well, I mean, the thing is, I did invest a lot of time, and I always do, because I think for the type of books I write, because I'm a character writer, the characters have to be kind of people you're interested in and or sympathise with and or love and or hate, and they have to feel like they're genuine kind of people. So I spent a lot of time with, during creating Zoella and Kiri and Maru. To be honest, probably fairly equal amounts of time. I probably did a bit more on Kiri actually, because she's kind of the fundamental person in the story compared to everybody else, and Zoella and Maru are almost slightly back from Kiri, but they're, the three of them are the heart and the core of the Shapewood story really. And of course, you get to the end of what your story tells, and you have to decide the fates of those characters and what's going to happen to them. Different things happen to all three. Because of the way the story wraps up, and you've got to, you've got to do what feels right, and that was the ending I'd come up with. That's what I wrote, and it felt right sort of ending. It wasn't happy, but it wasn't. It also wasn't sort of everyone lives happily ever after, but it wasn't like right they all died and that's it. So that's not that for me wasn't a satisfactory ending. You have to have an ending that feels like it kind of could have happened, and maybe it's a bit tragic, but maybe it's bittersweet, maybe it's reflective, maybe it's well, what if, and maybe it's maybe there is something in the future. Who knows? Kind of it's like leave things a little bit open. But will I do the audiobook as well again? Well, the audiobook for 4 is out, so the Shapewood saga is on all formats. So that was good. So there we go. So opposing opinions from the internet. Do you read the book or watch the film? It's a complicated book, and it's quite old. I suppose it's a 60s book. I think it's 60s. June, we're talking about suddenly here, and as a result, it's very not paced. It's probably the kindest way I can say it. Compared to a modern book, there's a lot of exposition early on, okay, about the structure of the universe and the terminology in the universe and all that sort of stuff, which you wouldn't generally do in a modern book so much. So it's of its time. That's not to say that's wrong or right. It's just not way most books read nowadays. So it's a tough one for a modern audience. I think if you're older perhaps and you're used to that sort of book and you haven't read it before, then it's probably worth reading the book. Having not seen the new movie, I obviously can't recommend that first because I haven't seen it, but it'll be interesting to see how I kind of pitch it. So let's find out. I'm not sure on that one. Within 1974, I did laugh when Maru said in one scene towards the end, I was probably unconscious at the time. Yeah, I think I dropped that in as kind of like I think I need to kind of borrow Maurice, be knocked out again. So things happen. So you write these stories and you finish off the characters in a way that feels right for the story, and that's basically where I get up to. So there we go. Glenn says my wife has never read or seen any other Dune things, and she was surprised she followed the plot well from the movie. Well, that's a good sign for the movie because it's not a simple plot, and therefore if the movie is able to explain it well in 2.5 hours, 3 hours, whatever it is, then that's really good. So awesome. That's really good. I was pretty surprised when I picked up Dune Messiah the other week that it's visibly so much shorter than the first book, like barely a third of the length. That's interesting. Twiggy says, Elite need to let you take control of the law. Oh well. Ship sailed. I think that one's long gone, Twiggy, I'm afraid. Karumba is here. Hello, Karumba. Good to see you. Popping along as well. So, just a very, very brief note on Elite, actually. and I'm not really about Elite actually, to be honest, because that's not what the stream is about. This is obviously about writing, so we'll stay on topic. But I just did want to say a big thank you to a few people who have sort of pitched in and basically gone, "You're right, mate." So, "You're right, hun," and I am absolutely fine. Okay, I don't do things. I don't knee jerk. I'm not a knee jerky sort of person. Okay, so this is a very calm and considered thing that I've done. Right, I've had some people, offer me some advice. Like, okay, thanks. As if I haven't considered everything, and I've gone, no, I have considered everything. I'm old and I'm wise-ish. I'm completely okay. You don't need to worry. I'm not going off the deep end. Well, not anymore off the deep end. So I do appreciate the few notes of concern that I've had that maybe I was losing my marbles, which is probably true, but not for those reasons. I am emotionally entirely at ease with the decision that I've made. Okay, it's not a problem. I will continue to waffle on my streams. I will continue to make content. I will continue to have fun. I will continue to be creative. In fact, I've been more creative in the last week than I think I've been for a month or so. So I'm all good. I'm all good. Have I been upsetting people? Possibly, yes. By my very existence, I seem to upset people. I did sound upset in the last Lord topic. I think I was just trying to bring it to a conclusion, really. I suppose, if you are, what do I feel about it? I think I'm disappointed. And it's kind of like a bit of a shame. But I'm not, I'm emotionally resilient enough not to kind of, it's not that much of a wrench, because it's kind of been gone for a while. I think I've slowly come to the conclusion that, well, there we go. It is what it is, and it's not what I would like it to be, but I'm not in charge, so therefore, let bygones be gods. Celebrate what fun I did have, and kind of move on and do other creative things, because there's plenty of time. So one door closes, another opens. Exactly. So it's and nothing that I do is dependent upon any computer game, really, at all. So I've had lots of fun. I think it's probably going to be better for for the game, possibly, and for everybody else involved if I don't say anything about it ever again, because people do. This is really funny to me, because I am just a guy on the internet, right? And people do tend to go, "Well, Dru-ids said this," so. And I know that I've been associated with it a long time, and yes, I've played it for a long time, and blah blah blah. But there are loads of other people in exactly the same position as me, so it's probably better for everybody that if people have put me on a bit of a pedestal, then we take that pedestal and we get rid of it. So I will no longer be the lore master. Not that I ever really was, but it's just time to go and do something different for me. But I am entirely at peace with that decision. Okay, I'm not at all concerned. I'm not at all wounded or injured by it. It's all good. Okay, you don't need to worry about me. I'm absolutely fine. So space shenanigans and stuff. All that stuff continues. I mean, we've got space shenanigans with Wing Commander series. We've got space shenanigans with No Man's Sky. There are lots of other games for me to kind of space shenanigan with, and all those kind of things. So there's no concern. There's plenty more waffling. All that sort of thing. So so it's all good. Okay, it's all good. But what I do is appreciate is a few people have pointed me in the direction of people saying, Drew did this and Drew did this, and thank you very much, Drew, for all the things you've done. And I do genuinely really appreciate all the voices in the community that said basically just said thanks, Drew. And for the stuff I've done, I've had huge opportunities, and I'm very grateful for those. Thank you very much for them. To all the fans of Elite out there that have followed me and enjoyed my stuff, and then have told me so. Absolutely, thank you to them. And obviously, to Frontier for making Elite dangerous in the first place. Yes, I think they've lost their way a bit with what they're currently doing, but they created Elite Dangerous Horizons, and they did, I think a pretty damn fine job of that. 9 years of entertainment out of one game is pretty darn good. So Frontier gets props for that as well. And I genuinely hope for them that they get Odyssey fixed and they put some stuff in it that makes it a big success. Time will tell. That's not my problem, that's theirs, and I wish them the very best with it. But I'm not going to be there, okay? I'm going to go and do something else. And that's it. So, I'm fine. I'm okay. It's all good. The game will do absolutely fine without me. And we had some good times. Let's remember the good times. All good things, etc., etc., etc. Can I tell us where Raxler is? I don't know. I have been accused. A couple of places I've seen is basically Drew lied and told us Raxler was in the game. It's like, no, I didn't. David Braben told me that Raxler was in the game, so I just repeated that because it's David Braben, right? So I don't know. I have never known where Raxler is. I don't know what Raxler is. It's never been in any law documents I've ever seen. I don't know. I have no insider information about Raxler at all, I'm afraid. There we go. So there we go. So that's all good. So that was the only thing. So and obviously, amidst the hundreds and hundreds of thanks, Drew. It's been good, and sad to see you go sort of emails. There have been the odd kind of sod off and die, shall I say, type emails and comments, and as well. It's the internet, you're going to get them, okay? So, again, don't, I'm big enough and ugly enough to basically laugh at those sort of comments, because you get them no matter what you do, okay? Some people don't like you regardless, and that's just fine. So, that bothers me not in the slightest. But I do appreciate all the kind of well-wishing. Thank you very much. So, yes, that's me paraphrasing slightly. But there we go. Drew is going to take the secret of Raxler. If only I knew it. I have toyed with the idea that on my deathbed I'll go, and the secret of Raxler is. I think I might just do that for a laugh. But there we go. So there have been a few, but I think the trolls are trolls are trolls, right? So haters gonna hate. I think it is. I don't know where that comes from originally, but somebody else has said that to me. But yeah, it is what it is. So I will. Don't feed the trolls. That is exactly the right advice. Don't engage with people who are that small-minded and or are just arguing for the sake of arguing, or intend to just rile you because all they're after is a reaction. They don't care about the actual item under discussion at all. They're just trying to get reaction, and so if you don't provide them with a reaction, they very quickly get bored and go off and do something else. Best advice for any kind of internet bully, or just bullies in general, really. So there we go. That's my advice. Don't feed the trolls. I think I was saying Sod Off and Die. I don't know. I think it's Sod Off and Die UK. I suppose it is a bit, really. I suppose it is. So that's how I've kind of characterised it. Is the funny thing, the thing that always makes me laugh, and I'm always inclined to say it, but I don't, because obviously don't feed the trolls. Is basically, okay, well, so you don't like the fact I've put an opinion somewhere. You don't like the fact I've made a video. You don't like the fact that lots of other people are commenting on this, going, say, basically, yes, I feel the same way. So you've decided to put a comment on the video. It's like, if you're bothered about what I'm saying, why are you commenting? Doesn't make any sense. But there we go. Oh, you say F instead. I suppose maybe sod is just a bit of a Britishism. Don't say it to the police when they pull you over. No, don't do that. That won't help. So anyway, so that's enough about the space game that shall not be mentioned. So onwards we go to the main topic, hopefully, of the evening. And stuff. So back to science fiction then. Back to science fiction. Now I was toying with this again. Now we have discussed this before, but I do want to get back into it because it's now important to me. Okay, because I've got some ideas, and I need to resolve this in my head, and I haven't quite done it satisfactorily to my way of thinking yet. Is space travel, okay? And by this I mean faster than light space travel. In a plausible way. So let's go back many moons. I can't remember when we last talked about it, but this is FTL travel. All right. FTL travel. So to set the scene for my next space series, and those of you who know the Shadewood stuff will know that it's got realistic physics. Okay, there's none of this breaking the laws of physics stuff. Okay, in Shadewood, and I've been quite rigorous around that because I felt that it was a bit of a cop out to break the laws of physics in the story unnecessarily. So, for example, when I first set out with Shadewood, I thought, well, I'd like the characters to have some weird powers that I could use, and then I thought, well, hang on a minute, I can't kind of do the Force from Star Wars because A, that's been done, but B, that whole kind of telekinesis thing actually can't happen in our universe because it breaks the laws of physics, as we know them anyway. Now, that's not to say that some incredible future tech could mimic some of those things. Now, for example, telepathy, I can see a very straightforward route to that being a thing using technology. Okay, so we know how radio works today, obviously, and we put mobile phones to our ears and we can speak to someone thousands of miles away. It doesn't take much of a leap of imagination to go from, right, why don't we just embed some sort of radio transmitter microchip, some sort of radio network communications mechanism like a mobile phone network, and then I can, using my mind, I can dial up, I don't know, let's say I wanted to talk to Glenn, hello Glenn, it's Drew in your head. Hey, how's it going? It's 3 a.m. in the morning. Switch off your damn transmitter. I'm not quite sure what the idea of getting ringtones in your head would be like, but but my point is, you can see a technological way that telepathy, and it wouldn't really be telepathy in the sense of direct brain-to-brain communication, but it would effectively achieve the same thing. I would be able to go, right, I'm going to call Glenn. Glenn, how's it going? And then if Glenn was there, we could have a chat through, and both of us would be gazing oddly into the middle distance while we were talking in our heads to each other, which would be very odd. I'm just on the phone. Waffles in your head, not spam, yeah. But you see what I mean? Okay, there's a technological way to fix that particular problem. Of course, when you rang me, I go, I'm sorry, Drew is staring out the window at the moment and is unable to take your call. I wonder how that would work actually in practice. If we had little transmitters in our heads, would you have to sort of switch your brain onto do not disturb mode if you were in the middle of concentrating? Or would you, because otherwise people could just ring you up. I wonder how it would work. There'd have to be all sorts of interesting etiquettes about, because there's certain times of day and certain activities that you probably wouldn't want to have phone calls, aren't there? Do not disturb is airplane mode. So that would be quite interesting, but that's not kind of the point. So telepathy, easy to see a technological solution to that particular kind of weird, wacky mental power. But the Force, for example, so let's take Star Wars. Luke Skywalker or Obi-Wan Kenobi, Yoda, whoever it is able to levitate objects. By the power of their mind. Or at least the Force is manipulated by their thoughts in some way that's not entirely clear, and objects can move around and fly through space, defying the force of gravity, and it's not exactly clear how that works, but modern phones already have those settings. Yeah, but I don't know how to work a modern phone. In fact, here's an aside, here's a waffle. We went to this is really funny. We went to a restaurant in London after the Back to the Future show, and I shan't name the restaurant because it's not fair. But it was most amusing because we went in, and this was a new thing for me. We went and sat down at the table, and we're waiting happily, as you do for the waiter or waitress to appear. Presently she turned up. Are you ready to order? To which my wife and I basically, well, we haven't seen a menu yet, so it's a bit difficult to order. And this waitress pointed at the table and said, "There's a QR code there. You're supposed to scan it with your mobile phone and choose what you want from the app." To which my wife and I sort of exchanged a look. I went, we both got our phones out, put on our reading glasses, as you do when you're old. Did the old person thing. How's that work? What do you have to do? Anyway, it wasn't very successful, let's put it that way. We did eventually manage to get there, but I was like totally befuddled by this. I said, I said to the waitress, I have never been to a restaurant where there aren't any menus. And half the fun of going to a restaurant is like, here's the menu. I might have that. I might have that. I might have that. And I've got to get my. What happens if I don't have a smartphone? Am I going to starve to death? I mean, what? I thought this is technology for technology's sake. This is awful. I mean, the food was fine when we eventually managed to order it, but I thought, why? So that was odd, and I guess it's it's just a thing. It's going to go that way. It just felt to me wrong on so many levels, but it's just weird. So so technology is invading all our lives in a weird sort of way. But anyway, so that's kind of a sign. Now I can't see side effect of COVID. Well, it hasn't affected that many restaurants that I've been to. It's only this particular one that so far that I've seen, but I don't go to restaurants very often, so maybe that's part of it. It could be a COVID related thing, I suppose. So yes, it was just really strange. A lot of restaurants did that here, so they did not have COVID clean menus for COVID reasons, but yeah, give me a real menu. So I wonder if they'll go back though. So there we go. The way I see it, if you'll go full hard sci-fi, not have FTL, you can just go ahead and put it in. So okay, well, you're preempting the discussion there, Commander GR 1988. You can't go to the conclusion straight away. Steady on, fella. So I haven't even set up the premise yet. Give me a chance. Here's the conclusion I've decided. Very good, very prompt. So the Force. Okay, so hang on a minute. So Luke Skywalker can lift objects. Now there isn't a way you can do that. Doesn't matter what you have with our current level of understanding of physics. There isn't a technological fix for that. Yes, I mean obviously there's things like drones that can fly, but they work by lift, okay, and propellers and stuff. That's clearly not what's happening when an apple drifts across the room. There isn't any way to do that. Okay, you can't do it with magnets because the item has to be, made of metal in some fashion, or have metal components in it, ferrous metal components in it. So that won't work with an organic material. It might work with a, some sort of spaceship on some sort of magneto levitating pad or something, like a maglev train or something like that. But you can't make an apple fly in a controlled fashion through the air. Okay, you can't do it. There is no way to do that with any technology that we're aware of. It breaks the laws of physics. Okay. Magnets, lots of magnets, and mysticism, whoosh. But there isn't, unlike the telepathy example, there isn't a technological equivalent that would work. Okay, so then you're into kind of made-up physics. Well, these made-up physics today, they're things like, exactly what Glenn's just said: manipulation of gravity waves and magnetized ferrets and things like that, or bits of string. Maybe that's how they do it. So that's the sort of stuff. So when I came up with the powers that exist in the Shadewood universe, I said, no, I'm not going to break the laws of physics. So that the powers that they do exhibit in Shadewood have a technological explanation, which is revealed right at the end of the 4-book saga. So in books 1 to 3, you don't know how it works, but you're aware of the basic premise that I've been operating under, that I'm not breaking the laws of physics. Now, when it comes to my new series, I've basically got the following problem, is that we're in about the year 5. Let me get the exact year because I've worked it out. Which year are we in? Higura timeline. Here we go. We are actually in at the point Shadewood ends, and roughly when the present time Higura story is being set, is actually I worked out it's Shadewood year, or Shadewood round, 2308, which is 2,308 years since the founding of the Azurio planet. But it's actually 5251 AD. Okay, it's the year 5251. That's when my story is set in Earth years. Okay, so we're talking 3,200 years in the future. Now, technology hasn't always gone forward during those 3,000 years, but it's safe to say that it has gone forward quite a lot for the purposes of this new story. Whereas my Shadewood world regressed back and hasn't kind of reached the same levels of technology that even we have today, the rest of the universe, that doesn't apply. So I have spacefaring technical cultures that have had 3,000 years of progress over where we are today. And so my issue is I want to keep the sci-fi, as in it's science-based, not just fantasy. But I've got to make some allowances for two things. One, 3,000 years have passed. And B, I have got the issue that I do have, by the nature of the way I've set up my lore, civilizations in different star systems. So they're, in a 20 light year radius of Earth, there are perhaps, I think, how many stars have I got in here? Let me just tell you that I've done the plotting for. I have got 27 stars, okay? 27 star systems, which I've kind of plotted some history for. So that's the scope. So we're not talking massive distances in terms of the galaxy, okay? So, the galaxy is 400 billion stars and maybe 100,000 light years across. Okay, I'm only dealing with a complete radius of maybe 30 light years, 20 light year radius, maybe 40 light years total diameter. So not vast by the nature of some space operas. Very, very close to Earth. And yet, okay, if I want to have, for the purposes of a novel, people from different star systems interacting with each other in some fashion, I have to wrestle with the problem of, do I allow faster than light travel in some form? Now, as we know, just catching up with the chat, you cannot change the laws of physics. This is the problem. Laws are made to be exaggerated. Warp bubbles, send the apple to another star. Everyone's coming up with apple solutions, which is excellent. Sometimes you have to preempt certain scientific discoveries, whether or not they pan out in real life. For instance, there's an ongoing experiment CERN to see whether antimatter reacts to gravity in the same way with normal matter. The results aren't out yet, but you could preempt it on the optimistic side. Yeah, so that's a good thing, and that has been done. Arthur C. Clarke did that. So that is, that is very much a way of doing things. Like the iPhone 50. Intergalactic trebuchet, that is a solution. Take a long time to wind that up, I think. Does your society change the way of recording years? Well, I haven't. I have worked out a basics on that. I've got what I call an Earth date, which is the AD date. I've tracked things with my Azurio date for events on Shadewood, and I've also come up with what I will rename, but I haven't got a better name for it. Well, I've called the New Era date, which doesn't start until effectively Earth is abandoned. So, and that's dissimilar again. So there's all that sort of stuff there too. So Sean is here as well. Yay, good to see you, Sean. And it took a while to get connected tonight. It's always a way. Dr. Questin, that's a great question, because usually a governmental body adopts the time standard and calendars. How would that change in space time? Well, I haven't wrestled with that particular problem, but I am aware of it, so I do need to have a play around with that one too. And the Kazakh says any sufficiently advanced technology will be indistinguishable from magic. Now that is very true. Now that's obviously Clarke said that, and I think we've got enough examples of that in our day-to-day lives to basically say it's very, very difficult for us to say what won't be possible in the future. What seems impossible today may be a trivial undertaking in the future. We don't know, right? If you took a mobile phone back to even Victorian times, maybe not all that long ago, Edwardian, Victorian, possibly a bit before that, that would be insane magic, because they had no idea that you could transmit information through nothing. They required wires, or I think they didn't understand the electromagnetic waves. All that sort of kind of knowledge of that entire medium of things are not, simply wasn't there. So they would have no context for which to understand how a mobile phone worked, let alone moving pictures on a device that can light itself up. All those things that we nowadays are just perfectly ordinary. And in fact, some of us of slightly advancing years, like myself, you took a mobile phone of today's technology back to our childhood, it would have been science fiction. It would have been that's not possible. How's that done? What's it made out of? It would be unfathomable. We would have an appreciation that it was the sort of thing that was likely to occur in the far distant future at some point. But the prevalence of LCD technology, things like that, would be things that we'd find quite hard to accept even back in the 1970s, I think. So all those sort of things are interesting to see, and and the abilities of computers today, it weren't really imagined back then in many ways. It's interesting to see again. If you think of the genetic sequencing, the first. The Human Genome Project, not that long ago, took years and years and years and years to unravel and map the human genome. Now we can do it in an afternoon, and it just shows how computer technology and power and processing, all those kind of good stuff, have changed dramatically, and solving problems that we didn't even know were addressable. Before the advent of computers, all those sort of things. So it's very, very difficult to predict if you've got. Technology and progress continuing on. Now, that's not to say in those 3,000 years that I'm doing there aren't backward steps. We're living today still in very much a revolution in the way that information is consumed and our society works and all those kind of things. We've got multiple, like any generation has, we have multiple problems we're trying to deal with. We're sitting in a time of rapid technological change still, even after all these years and decades. And the pace of that change is continuing. It's very, the things that, the advice that we give our children is out of date, and the advice that our parents gave us was out of date. Whereas years and years and years ago, before industrialization, life didn't change all that much for most people for generations. You could be very, very stable without much technological change for very long periods of time. We don't live in an era like that. We live in an era where change is extremely rapid, and a lot of the stuff that we learnt as children is just totally and utterly irrelevant now because it's history. Whereas hundreds of years ago, you could pass your skills on to your children and be fairly comfortable in the knowledge that they would be doing the same thing with their grandchildren and so on and so forth for a number of generations after you without much change to the environment. So it's difficult to say what will be achieved and what can and cannot be achieved. So it's interesting. Cat Weasel and the Telling Bone, yes. Jen, I think I've been reading quite a lot of sci-fi recently. There was Sublight, Spacecraft, Le Guin's Ecumen Universe, Adrian Tchaikovsky's Children of Time, Power than Hamilton Light Chaser. They all link quite heavily into the long journey times and effects of the dilation. It works quite well. Yeah, so that's a choice. That's a stylistic choice. So, for example, if you accelerate hard in sublight speeds, you can get to places relatively quickly from the perspective of the people on board the ship. However, you've still got the problem of time passing outside the ship for any observers in the rest of the universe. So that's an interesting thing. How about transporter technology, albeit long range? So that's quite good. A car would be black magic in medieval times. Yeah, imagine doing that. That would be quite cool. Sean says, I think the mobile in the 70s would not be so dramatic because we all saw Star Trek communicators and walkie-talkies. So those things seem quite pedestrian, don't they? The stuff from the original Star Trek series now. Solitons are the answer, though they need to reduce power requirement by a factor of 30, so energy equivalent to the mass of Jupiter. That is a problem. There's so many Jupiters to go around. So you don't necessarily need FTL travel to create a bubble of human inhabited systems. No, you don't. But, and here's the narrative rub. Okay, if you want the action to move between systems and you want those to have some sort of interaction on the overall plot, then you've got to provide a mechanism for those systems to be able to interact in close to real time. And close to real time is obviously the nub of the matter. So, if your story takes place over, let's say, a handful of months or perhaps a year, which was the case with Shadewood. I think the entire elapsed time for Shadewood was about 3 years in total. Then that doesn't, some of our characters are on a spaceship. How long have they been gone for? Well, 20 years. They'll be here soon. That may not work, and it's not going to work for the sort of story that I'm probably planning to tell. So the trick is maintaining a control of a vast civilization or empire with sublight tech. So that's quite an interesting one. You don't necessarily need FTL, no, but you have to kind of work within its region. Now I'm still toying with this one. Space travel is dangerous and always have the risk to some sort of transport and might be a better choice, and tech could be so alien you don't need to explain it. That's another possibility. There could be other ways of getting around other than spaceships. But I do like spaceships, okay? So spaceships are cool. Then you do have the evolutionary divergence issue, all those sort of things. That's quite good. And Dumpill 7830, thank you very much for the comment there, that's good. It's actually quite scary how many real life items and inventions were inspired by Star Trek. I mean, the tricorder is very like our mobile phones, isn't it? And some of that technology is very much how the world is today, which is good. It's nice to see, that sort of stuff. Dr. Chris MD, without development of a lot of other technologies as a comparison, the biological side, you may never reach the stars. And that's a very good point, because we've talked about this before. In order to accommodate non-FTL space travel, maybe we don't have to change the laws of physics. All we have to do is change our biology to cope with the time. So there's another alternative as to how that might work. And I think that could be quite fun to explore in the science fiction context as well. I think that's quite a good one. There's this whole entangled particles and transmission thing. I think that's valid as well. And then there are obviously the kind of standard staples of sci-fi long distance travel. So you've got hyperspace, where you jump into an alternative dimension, maneuver through some alternative dimension, and then drop back into normal space, and boom, you're at your destination, even though that destination was a long way away. You've kind of got the warp drive thing, which is sort of a you're bending space in some fashion in order to compress it, which means that as you move through it, you move through a compressed volume of space, and then when you get to your destination, you sort of unstretch things again, and that's another way of doing it. And you get around FTL in that context because you never actually move faster than light in your reference frame. You just do other things. So that's been done a lot of times. You've also got things like wormholes. So you've also got the idea that you can punch a hole through space-time and link it up with another hole somewhere else in space-time, and then you travel through it, and they link up separate points in space-time through some sort of extra-dimensional kind of rift, and you basically move through that and you pop out into space at the other end, in a different space-time area, and those sort of things. Now the interesting thing is, of course, Nimduskrin, so how did Firefly solve for travel to other stars, or did they just skip it? Well, Firefly was actually set in a single solar system. If you go and look up the lore on Firefly, that they're only in one solar system. The solar system has a lot of planets and moons, however, many of which are habitable. So that's how Firefly did it. There is no FTL, as far as I'm aware, in the Firefly universe. So that's an interesting one. You basically set your sphere, if you like, of where the story takes place in a single solar system, so you don't ever have that problem. The early seasons of The Expanse kind of did that as well. Basically, you had highly realistic spacecraft manoeuvring in our solar system, in the solar system, and there isn't any FTL there either. So that's another way of solving that problem. You just go to one place and stay there. They did leave Earth. I wonder how they got there. I don't know. Maybe somebody who knows a bit more about the Firefly background can tell me. I mean, you see it briefly mentioned at the beginning of the Serenity film, Earth that was and things like that. I assume they went on some sort of sleeper ships or something, and then did some terraforming when they got to this other system. So I don't know. So that one's quite interesting. So basically there's it's a single star system that they end up in, and it's got lots and lots of habitable planets, some of which are terraformed. So that's that one. The energy requirement will be massive. So this is the problem there. Generating wormholes and all those kind of things is how do you tap into enough energy to make it work, etc., etc., etc. Now, with 3,000 years of potential technological improvement, it's very difficult to say what can and can't be done. Going back to that whole, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Now we've as humanity many times we basically said, well, yes, well that's the laws of physics. You can't get past that, only to find out that we're wrong. Okay, and even today, I mean, we've made great strides with physics and astrophysics and theoretical physics and stuff. And even now they're working on some extra additional piece, because there's obviously the standard model of the universe, okay, which has the the quarks and the muons and the Higgs bosons and all that sort of stuff, and they're still missing parts of that which are tantalizingly odd, don't quite work for us yet. Okay, so there are gaps in our understanding which we've yet to close. Now, whether any of those gaps allow for the possibilities of weird and wacky technologies like anti-gravity or fast and light travel, that's beyond my pay grade. I don't know. I'm a science fiction writer. But I keep an eye on them, okay, because I keep an eye on them. Now, at the moment, and I did an analysis on this a little while back, that the most promising potential theoretically viable method for FTL travel that could potentially exist in our universe without violating the laws of physics is some sort of wormhole. It ranks alongside the warp drive as not entirely impossible at the moment. Hasn't been ruled out of contention. There are solutions to general and special relativity that allow for warp drives and wormholes to exist. In fact, there's some postulation that natural wormholes could exist as well. Obviously, nobody's observed one, but these things are not impossible as we currently understand things. Now, they may require very, very exotic forms of energy or configurations of energy, matter, and space-time, but they're not impossible. That doesn't mean they're possible, but so far, the equations basically say they're not impossible. So, example, Einstein, Rosen bridges, all those sort of constructs. Okay, and there's various solutions for wormholes in special relativity and general relativity that people have come up with different ways of doing it. So there's all sorts of stuff that is possible. Now, my conundrum, which I'm still wrestling with at the moment, is: do I want to assume, for the purposes of my story, that such a technology has been invented in those 3,000 years, or do I want to stick with that actually humanity has got a good grasp of the physics, and what we understand as the limitations of travel in the universe now are always going to be the limitations of travel in the universe? And I'm undecided at this point which way I want to go. Because on one hand, sticking to science as we understand today is the limiting factor. Does have the virtue of being very easy to basically define what is right and what's wrong. Okay, nope, you can't do that because it's not possible by 21st century science. On the flip side, I'm thinking to myself, well, I've got no idea what's going to be possible in 3,000 years' time, given technological change. So, who am I to say that it can't be done? And then then my head flips back to, well, yeah, now you're copping out. You're just You're just making up magic tech to solve a problem that you want to be able to do. So I don't know. It's a difficult one to wrestle with. Should the narrative drive the answer to the question? Well, I think that's a very good. question. I'm angling towards that, Wintermute. I'm angling towards that because the sort of stories I want to tell require different locales. Okay, and I think I'm going to probably, and I'm not entirely 100% certain on this yet, but I think I'm probably likely to allow some sort of FTL. I don't want it to be easy FTL, if you see what I mean. Because we've talked about the energy requirements of that being huge, and there has to be some cost for doing something extraordinary, I think. But I would like there to be a mechanism for FTL, I think, because I think the narrative will be better for it. So, for example, and Glenn's already touched on this, is that if it would be very, very hard to hold some sort of federation or empire or whatever political structure we decide that it's going to be, without the ability to communicate at decent speed. So, if you've got an empire of 5 star systems, but you can only communicate with that star system, at the speed of light, then can you hold an empire together? Does it actually is it an empire if there isn't some sort of communication? Those sort of things. So there's considerable. I think the energy demands. I certainly don't want it to be Star Warsy. Just plot the coordinates for Alderaan, hit the hyperspace. Boom, off we go. That kind of makes the galaxy feel a bit too like just taking a trip around the M25. For those of you who live in the UK. Or Interstate 101 or whatever it is in America. You don't just get on the highway and go uptown. I don't want it to be like that. Likewise, I don't really want the Star Trekky kind of just engage the warp drive and we'll get to the star. I don't want that. I want it to be tricky. I want it to be potentially hazardous, and something that you're going to think twice about doing because it's difficult. Maybe very, very few people are capable of it, or maybe very, very few ships are capable of it due to maybe the energy requirements or whatever it happens to be. So you're thinking ahead with me there, JR19. That's a very good point. If you're going for wormholes and there's no portable generators, they'll be at fixed points in space and therefore choke points and bottlenecks. So obviously I have to have a bit of a head scratch about what a fixed point in space would actually be. I don't know. That's an interesting thing. Stuff like that is interesting. All of a sudden today I keep getting advertisement breaks during the stream. I never get used to that. So I don't know what's happening there. I'll have to check settings in case Twitch has changed something on my account. So I will investigate that for you, my friends. Apologies for that. But I think Wintermute is mostly on the case. Is that then does the narrative need to drive the story? Yes, it does. If the narrative is going to drive the story, then that is probably where I'm going to go. And I do want there to be interactions between different systems with different ethoses and different flavours. And I may just need to nail this one. So I'm leaning in that direction, but I haven't quite figured out the mechanics that I want to use because I don't want to borrow somebody else's mechanics. Okay, so I don't want hyperspace. Hyperspace is no. I don't really want warp drive because it's too easy. Both of those are too easy and convenient for me. You just target lock the system and jump, off we go. That's not good. So guys, apologies for the weird ads. I'm not quite sure what's happening there. I will go and check my settings in case I accidentally switch something on or off. I'm not sure. I don't think I've changed anything, so apologies for that. It says Dru-ids taking an ad break. I'm not taking an ad break. I'm still here. He really wants us to buy detergent and tooth cleaners and auto insurance. That's weird. Hopefully, well, leave that with me and I'll go and investigate. Maybe I accidentally switched something on or off. So that's kind of where I'm getting to. I don't want it to be easy. I kind of quite like the idea of something like a wormhole that's hard to use, or there's a massive cost, or it's owned by somebody because it's a massive investment of time and resource, or something like that. There has to be a much more compelling reason for it. Because I think if you've got the problem I see, if you're trying to make a story that's vaguely realistic. So, for example, I mean, again, take computer games that we shan't mention. The sudden invention of a hyperdrive technology like the stuff we see in many of these games would totally destabilize the political situation, in the sense that you can move things all over the place at really, really high speed. It would make boundaries and territories irrelevant almost straight away, and so you can't have that kind of technology and retain the same political identity as you had before, because it's like today, us just suddenly be able to teleport into different countries at will. It's like it would just change. The world would not stay the same. So those sort of things are, I think interesting. So the mechanism has to have a lot of limitations built into it. I like the idea, for example, of it being stuck in a place so it becomes a choke point or a natural confluence point, a bit like like the Suez Canal, or the what's the one across Mexico? The one I mean, between the Atlantic and the Pacific. That one is. Those sort of places, they're kind of like wormholes, aren't they? In the sense they connect two places that otherwise there's no other way around. Obviously, those are partly human-made and partly natural, and then we've just enhanced them to join them up. Panama Canal, there we are. Those are kind of like maritime wormholes, really, aren't they? They connect places that otherwise would be impossible for those vessels to go. Take them such a lot further time. Tannhauser Gate, yeah. Could be a natural wormhole that varies in usability over time, but in an erratic way. Ownership, disputes, all those sort of things. So you've got lots of possibility for politics with that sort of route, which appeals to me from the narrative side of things, because then you've got the opportunity for conflict. Then you've got the opportunity for trying to sneak through. You've got the possibility of illegal usage and smuggling and all those sort of things that would go with a gate type construct in a novel. So that's sort of where I'm leaning to, I think. But I kind of do want to obviously play around with it. But what I want to do is I want to go with as much physics as I can. So what I don't want to have in my universe, I don't want anything like inertia dampening, and I don't want anti-gravity, because there doesn't seem to be a way of doing it. There's not even a theoretically vaguely plausible way of doing it. Okay. So I can allow, I think, a wormhole in my universe because it isn't ruled out by the laws of physics. Whereas things like anti-gravity and inertia dampening, there doesn't seem to be a way around that one. There's not even a plausible way that we can play around with physics to make that kind of stuff happen, as we understand at the moment. So I think it's kind of a case of blending some of that together. So. And I think that's the sort of stuff that shows like The Expanse have done. So, for example, if you look at Expanse seasons 1 and 2, it's all, relative physics. It's all, dealing with inertia. It's all dealing with orbits. It's all dealing with high speed, but still way, lower than the speed of light maneuverability in a relatively small volume of space inside the solar system. It's only in the later series that sort of weird stuff starts happening. But and that's the premise of that show. So Bajoran wormholes. So I have actually been watching Deep Space Nine the last few weeks. We've finished Next Generation. We're now on to Deep Space Nine, and the idea. I mean, Deep Space Nine hasn't really got going yet. I think I can see some potential in it, but I've not really watched it before, so I'm still in season 1. But I can kind of see the potential. It seems very twee and silly at the moment, Deep Space Nine, but you can sort of see the potential of, okay, you've got a space station that is sat next to a valuable, Panama Canal kind of thing. You can see why a city or a space station would exist in such a place. That makes a lot of sense. So Glenn says, isn't inertial dampening and gravity wave control part of a warp bubble concept? Could have had one. So yeah, I think you're right, Glenn. I think the problem is, in my head, if you could have a warp bubble effect, it doesn't necessarily need to make you travel FTL. You don't need to do that. You could just do it gently and move along at high speed in real space, and unfold your thing at the end. So I think if you don't maneuver at high speed in the real world, you're not going to have inertia to worry about. Okay. Anti-gravity is a different thing. So the kind of stuff that you see in virtually all sci-fi movies, where they have some sort of anti-gravity plating on the floor, okay, which basically allows them to film on Earth because it's cheaper for special effects. That is a problem for TV shows. I get that. So the stuff you see on Star Trek, the stuff you see on Star Wars, where everybody is able to walk around on the floor normally, that is very problematic for science at the moment. In order to generate a gravity field that intense, that wasn't, that could provide you with a floor you could stand on. I mean, there isn't any way to do that wouldn't have really, really bad side effects elsewhere, because it just isn't. So the whole spinning space station, the big wheels, the generation ship style idea appeals to me far more. But we've already had a discussion on the stream about, how big should a spaceship be and how practical is it to have a large spaceship. So I think there's also some issues with the size of spaceships and the complexity of having spinning parts on a spaceship, particularly if you want to maneuver. So I'm thinking of a combat vessel. If we don't have any kind of gravity plating, which I don't like, okay. I think in TV shows it's kind of required, and I get why. But in a novel, you don't need to be limited by an FX budget. So let's maybe dispense with the gravity plating. That means that your ships are, unless they've got great big spinny wheels, or they just rotate themselves. That gives you some maneuverability problems, because if you start trying to turn a spaceship that is rotating, it doesn't end well. Let's just put it like that. That is a very complicated thing to do. So in my head, if you have a big, let's say a liner, a space liner, and bits of it are rotating to provide, and I'm using the word artificial gravity here in the sense of inertia, okay, not anti-gravity, pseudo-gravity. Let's call it pseudo-gravity. If you want to maneuver that ship, you're going to have to stop those mechanisms, those bits of the ship rotating, okay, before you do complicated maneuvers, because trying to maneuver a ship, which is effectively like a gimbal really, with parts of it rotating, trust me, it won't work. There's some very, very good bits of astrophysics stuff that's been done on spinning stuff in space and trying to, it's okay if you try and leave it spinning in a particular orientation, but even that's problematic over the long term. If you try and maneuver with spinning bits, it's not good. Okay, it's not good. So that's a problem. Now it is, and then you've got all time dilations. Whichever way you turn, there's lots of issues. So I'm, inclined to, if you're going to have a big ship with spinny bits, right? It'll need to go through some sort of protocols for the kind of docking approach thing. So, for example, I would imagine that it would have to have periods of its flight where it's effectively in 0G. So the gravity. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to require you to depart the bar now. 0G operations will be occurring in approximately 30 minutes. Please ensure that you are all strapped into your couches. Kind of thing. It's going to have to be like that, even for stuff. And smaller ships. I mean, maybe gravity is a luxury item. or even pseudo-gravity. It's like, well, yeah, we can't afford to have a ship big enough to spin and provide us gravity, so we just have to slum it with 0G. And yeah, etc., etc. So I haven't quite worked out what I want to do there or what I don't want to do. So always write your novel so filmmakers have problems portraying it. Yeah. So yeah, anyone who's held a spinning gyro in their hand knows how hard turning a large ship would be. So you've got problems there. I mean, just with the mass of a large ship, and then you have to have the engines, and then you have to think about the acceleration. Now, we've talked about on this stream before that maybe the best design for a ship is actually not so much the kind of horizontal decks that you see on things like Star Wars and Star Trek, but actually more a vertical orientation, like a skyscraper, where the ship is designed to thrust at 1G. So all the time the engines are on, you've got this sort of skyscraper design where, because you're accelerating at 1G because of the thrust at the back of the ship, you appear to be like a skyscraper. And you get that normal gravity feeling of multiple decks because the whole thing's accelerating at 1G. And then all you need is a period halfway in the flight where, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I need you, everyone must return to their 0G deck for a moment, as the ship does a flip over, or maybe just has engines at the opposite end, which then switch on and provide you 1G deceleration until you get to your target, which again would feel the same. So those are the sort of things I'm toying with for the in-system travel. Now that's for a luxury liner where 1G is maybe acceptable, because you don't want 2G or whatever might be ghastly, or maybe half a G is all you need. I don't know. I haven't decided. And then for combat vessels. Right, for combat vessels, then obviously the occupants can cater for higher levels of G-force. Okay, so and again, we've talked on this stream before that maybe vessels could have, what's the human limitation today for sustained G? I think somebody would sort of tell me maybe that you can sustain 6 or 7, maybe even 8G for limited periods of time. With the right equipment. I don't know. I'm not up on that sort of stuff. I know, but it's several Gs is what we can cope with, and then maybe with advanced tech and biological manipulation, all those things. Maybe we could take higher Gs, or maybe weaponry is completely automated. So it's what's the physical limitations of what a device can cater for. What's the G limitation on electronics? It's going to be way higher than human flesh, isn't it? So maybe military vessels are all drones. I don't know. These are the sort of things I'm playing around with. So I believe back in the day it was 7Gs. That sounds about right. I do vaguely remember reading that sort of stuff. All right, Rookie, get ready for the best part of being a space liner. Full stop. And all this. Just imagine the bar. All the liquid jumps out of the bars. Any fighter pilots on the stream that can help? Yeah, anybody who knows what it is. Sustain 1G acceleration from a full standard is very expensive. So that's the rocket equation. So of course then you need to have a think about what sort of drive technology are we talking about here? Where does that energy come from to drive the ships? Again, we've lampooned this on this stream a few more times. The classic blue and white glow that comes out the back of all the spaceships. So I'm thinking classics like the original Battlestar Galactica. Virtually any spaceship in the 70s and 80s had a kind of blue-white glow coming out of the exhausts of the engines. And what is that? It's not rockets, is it? At least not in the traditional sense. It's not a chemical rocket. It's some sort of high-tech stuff. What is that blue glow? If only we knew what the blue glow was, we could. that's obviously the thing that you need for space engines. But whatever that is. It's an energy of some kind, isn't it, that's propelling the ship forward or accelerating it. So I do want to pay attention to the effects of inertia. I do want to pay attention to the effects of the lack of gravity and the potential solutions for it. I always thought of it like a sort of plasma ion drive. Green white glow would be scientifically better. And the blue-white glow is what I live for as a sci-fi fan. I know it's a green glow in Blake 7, isn't it? Yeah. Dear old Blake 7. I've got a lovely picture. Where is it? Somewhere. It's up. Where is it? I found it the other day. It must be in here somewhere. Somebody sent it to me actually. Just said. course, I can't find it now. I'll dig it out for the next stream. A lovely picture of the Liberator from Blake 7, which has a lovely green glow. So what is that? Plasma drive, ion drive. We've got ion drives in the real world. They're not nearly as powerful as they would like. They can only maneuver very, very slowly, but they can at least stay on all the time, unlike a kind of chemical engine. So it clearly isn't a chemical rocket. They've gone to plaid, all those sort of things. So I do want to have a good think about how that works, and I want to keep that very close to real physics, probably again with a few nods to narrative continuance, because I want that to be a dramatic item in the thing. So for example, if one of my spaceships gets chased by an automated drone which can accelerate far faster, you've got that whole chase dynamic then. Okay, we can only accelerate at 2G. That's the best our engines can do. Okay, but if we accelerate at 2G, our efficiency drops down to like 80%. So we can only thrust for that for like 30 minutes, or we'll be out of fuel. What are we going to do? The drone's coming in at 4G. It's going to catch us up in 12 minutes if we don't do something, or it'll catch us up in 20 minutes if we do this. That gives us this ability to try and shoot it down. Those sort of things are the sort of things I want my crews to be trying to make informed decisions on. Okay, so what do we do here? We can't outrun it, otherwise we'll kill everybody on board the ship. Or you can do that kind of. Well, some of us will make it. If we go to 4G, the old people aren't going to survive. What do we do? Do we sacrifice everybody, or do we try and keep the healthy and the young alive by going to 4G? It's those sort of narrative things that I think are very, very powerful, and gives the characters nice dilemmas for you as the reader to go, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? Because it's an impossible choice. Those I think are really, really good ways of connecting the mechanics of spaceflight into drama and good narrative. That sort of stuff. And you better back. They've got the plan. But I think that's interesting. And then of course you've got the technological and the biological enhancements that could have taken place to humanity during those times. So maybe there's a breed of spacers, people who live in space, who are adapted for those exact conditions. They've been genetically modified, or they've simply adapted over the years to the fact there isn't any gravity, or that there is occasional sustained high G. Okay, 4G might not be available in your area. 5G certainly isn't. So those sort of things are kind of good narrative things. We can do that high G burn, but some of us won't make it. And that has been done in The Expanse. That's a good mechanic for a bit of drama. All those kind of things I think are quite important. So that's kind of my conundrum really, is I'm wrestling with how far I feel it's reasonable to push it, but I also want to find my own level of tech. Star Wars hyperspace, done. Star Trek warp drive, done. Wormholes and things like that, less so. Lots of sci-fi franchises use wormholes, obviously, but less as a defining attribute, I think, of the thing. And Star Trek has got wormholes all over the place. They're Telepathy, but The Expanse had wormholes later on, all those kind of good things. Things like Farscape and all those sort of shows, they had stuff like that as well. So it's difficult to be totally brand new and imaginative in those kind of things. So I don't want to get too hung up on it, but I do want to find my own tech solution to the problem, and then make it so that it's not too convenient. So for example, if we took the Panama Canal or the Suez Canal, then that analogy works quite well for me, because it's like, okay, well, that's a choke point. Then there's going to be tariffs going through there. There's going to be political ownership of one side or the other of that transverse route, because people can make money out of it. Okay, maybe only really, really big organisations have the power and the technology and the sheer amount of resources to make something like that, in which case they're going to want to see a return on it. And so if somebody builds a wormhole there's going to be a really, really good financial reason for doing so. So then you kind of got the seat of, well, we haven't got a wormhole yet, but we'd like one. All that sort of stuff, one-upmanship and those kind of things. So I think there's quite a lot to work with there, and that's kind of what I'm playing around with at the moment in terms of the background lore of my environment. So people adapted to 4G. They are 3 foot tall and 6 feet wide. Yeah, that's quite good. BSG use jumps kind of like a wormhole. So yeah, that is. That's something as well. So, I think then there's the technology improvement. So if somebody's built a very, very basic, crude, expensive, inefficient wormhole, and then somebody next week comes along with version 2, which is better, faster, cheaper, all the more economical, those sort of things. That's a mechanic you can play around with as well. Is that we've just spent 20 years building this wormhole, and you've just turned up in a better one. Some people aren't going to like that, right? And you can play around with those kind of things. So maybe there's going to be, well, they're working on this new wormhole tech. Actually, we better go and sabotage that because we don't want them bringing out a new one because we've got control of the old one. That sort of thing. Mass Effect Dru, the Wagar drive, jump gates. The Dru-wavium drive. I like that. That's good. Space is like a fedora. You can get anywhere fast just by turning the hat instead of moving the ship. So I'm just going to adjust my heading here through space. Very good. All you need to remember with wormholes is that they are spherical. Yes, that's a very good point. So you're going to have to play around with those kind of things. So fortunately, that things like Space Engine do allow you to visualize some of these things quite effectively. So. Not like a drain, all those kind of things. So there's fun and games to play with there with those sort of things, and sort of see how that actually looks. So I'm undecided, but I'm moving in certain directions, and some of it I can't give away because spoilers for the next thing. But the sort of books that I write, and they are character stories. So ultimately, as Wintermute mentioned ages ago up in the chat. The narrative will play second fiddle to the needs of the characters because that's how my stories work, and thus the technology will have to play second fiddle ultimately to the narrative. This isn't hard science fiction for the sake of hard science fiction in my case. The characterization and the story come first, and then the technology fits into that. But I want to do all the work to make sure that the technology is kind of understand how it works, understand what the limitations are, and I can go with that for the year 5252 AD. Malfunctioning wormholes, big advice. Maru's starship, poor old Maru. And what about weapons? Okay, well that's a really good one, Rob's 2610. Weapons, I don't want laser beams. Okay, much as I like a good beam laser. Lasers aren't actually a very good solution for weapons on a spaceship, at least not in my head, because lasers are not the most efficient way of dealing with another ship. So I'm not a big fan of lasers. Again, I want to be careful of not going too close to things like the Expanse, but I think they did a really good job of it. It's like projectile weapons is where it's at, okay? Because if you get hit by a lump of anything travelling at 40,000 kilometres per second, you're toast. It doesn't matter what your ship is made of, right? You're toast. So if you can sling a projectile at somebody with a decent degree of accuracy at a really, really high speed, that's it. You won. Okay. The momentum equation is what is it? Is mv squared? Is it half mv squared? What is it? I can't remember now. I should know that off the top of my head. Energy of a body in motion equation. Kinetic energy, isn't it? Somebody will know. Particle beams. You see, so particle beams are a possibility. Is it a half mv squared? Half mv squared. Yeah, kinetic energy. Okay, so it's half mv squared. So basically, what that's saying is if you double the mass of something, it goes up by a factor of the mass. If you double the velocity of your object, it goes up by the square of the velocity. So that's important. So if you double the mass, it's twice as much. If you double the velocity, it's 4 times more powerful. So mv squared, half mv squared, is very, very important for, I think, for weapons in space. It's all about speed. If you can hit the enemy with something really, really fast, and it weighs an appreciable amount, then you're in good shape of doing them a lot of damage. So yeah, blast them with extra. So you could irradiate them. So there's lots of ways of being very nasty. So there's radiation, which however, it might not be a very effective weapon in the midst of battle, because if you zap somebody with a whole bunch of gamma rays, for example, yes, you've killed them, but probably not for like maybe 6 or 7 hours, which may not be very useful to you as the attacking vessel, because you might have been destroyed in that period of time while the rest of the crew is still operational. So death by radiation is a nasty way to kill people, but it's not effective in the very, very, very short term. Destroying the enemy vessel seems to be, to me, the way that space combat would occur. Now, if you think about that, then there's a few things that drop out of the whole weapons discussion. Is that I don't like the idea of shields either. Okay, so now they're a bit of a staple of science fiction, but again, there's no way in physics as we understand it for you to be able to project a shield the sort of way that you see it in Star Trek and Star Wars, where both laser and physical objects bounce off the shields. Okay, that there's no way to do that. An X-ray laser would be immediate with it, Wintermute. Okay, so I suppose it depends on the intensity, but yeah, okay, if it's high enough energy, I suppose it's high enough energy, isn't it? And that's the other thing. Any projectile weapon is quite dangerous, okay, because it could be lethal way beyond its effective range, couldn't it? If you suddenly run into, there was a battle, by the way, that took place 2 weeks ago, sir. Where was the battle? It was 5 million kilometers off our starboard bow. Oh, here it is now. You don't want to fly through the debris of somebody else's battle either. That's a problem too. So that is an issue, so I think, no point wasting a perfectly good ship. Just zap the life forms inside. So yeah, there is some things there. Now, would some of that be governed by all's fair in love and space war? I don't know. Would there be a kind of Geneva Convention as to what was acceptable warfare in space? Would everybody abide by those rules? So that sort of thing. It's always when Dru's about to say something interesting, all the ads turn up. What's going on? That's a bit weird. I will investigate that. So apologies for the sudden ad influx. I'm not sure what's going on there. X-ray or gamma rays lasers are triggered by nuclear detonation, and the rays are then focused. Okay. So that's interesting. So you could have directed energy weapons that would be instantly lethal. Being hit by a massive series of projectiles at very, very high speed, difficult to see how that can't be lethal virtually straight away as well. So is space combat actually a plausible thing? Is it something that would actually occur? Is there any way to defend against space combat? If we don't have magic space shields, do we accept that space combat, if somebody decides to attack us, then is that it? Is it kind of game? Is there any way to defend yourself against that, other than trying to out-accelerate things, which doesn't seem very likely for a big ship? And how do you defend yourself against a gamma ray laser? I don't know. Yeah, that's another interesting. So I'm again playing around with how probable it is that space combat can actually be a thing, and I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is. Kinetic weapons can pepper a ship full of holes, but if it's already depressurized in preparation for combat and still perfectly operational. Yeah, so that's another thing is Ray-Bans. Yeah, really good sunscreen. And most space combat, as shown in most shows, is at closer ranges than modern aerial combat. That's very true. You know, we get into visual range, don't we, and shoot at each other. And maybe it wouldn't be like that. Maybe the whole key thing about space combat, if you try and make it vaguely realistic, is that actually it's all about where the hell are you in space? And can I shoot at you with sufficient accuracy to actually kill you? Because there's the idea that, you know, if you're accelerating, it's very easy to spot you in space because of the heat or the exhaust signature of your ship is going to light you up like a Christmas tree. Everyone's going to know where you are. If you switch your engines off, then you sort of go a bit dark by comparison, so it's harder to spot your ship. But you've still got things like radar, and you've still got things like heat signatures that are relatively easy to detect. Because of, you know, the fact that heat gives off radio waves. Anything above 0 Kelvin gives off a radio frequency that's easy enough to pick up with the right equipment. So you can't hide in space, okay? But you do have the effects of light speed actually when you're even in the solar system. So, for example, if there's a ship in the orbit of Mars, and our protagonist ship, let's say, is in orbit of the Earth, and we want to have a fight with that ship, we have to figure out where the Martian ship is going to be at the point we open fire on it. And the Martian ship, of course, will see us open fire, and our projectiles won't be travelling at the speed of light. So if we fire at them when they're in orbit of Mars and we're in orbit of Earth, they've got 20 minutes of time once they see us fire, for them to react and move away from the trajectory of the incoming stream of bullets or whatever it is that we fired at them. So combat in space, I think, is going to be much more about the positional advantage. Okay, the closer you are to the target, the easier it is for you to be able to hit them, but the vice versa, right? So you don't want to get close to the target. So it's all going to be about, where is the enemy going to be in 10 minutes time? I'm going to point my weapons there, hoping that he doesn't second guess me and change course. That, I think, is going to be the essence of space combat. And it also depends on your objective. Do you want to destroy the enemy target in a kind of pitch battle, ship to ship? Or if you're, let's say, you want to be a space pirate, you don't want to damage the ship. You want the ship. The ship is the prize, or maybe at least the cargo, or possibly the people on board, the slaves or something. You want to preserve it. So how do you go and capture a ship that doesn't want to be captured? So those, I think, are the kind of quite dynamics. So maybe hostile boarding is much more of an interesting thing. You just basically need a faster ship so that you can catch them up, maneuver them, grapple them to a halt, connect your ship up, and then force your way on board. That, to me, feels maybe more like a lot of the space combat would be. So I don't know. These are the sort of things I'm playing around with. I don't like, X-wings in space and the whole kind of airplanes in space flight model. No, definitely won't be doing that, because that is utterly not realistic. I mean, it's fun to watch and we're all quite used to it, but that's not what space combat will be. Big ships. So one funny thing about space combat, how in TV movies big ships move slow and fighters move fast, it's because we're so used to the naval interpretation of space warfare. We're basically just assume there's no reason a big ship can't be travelling fast. It's just going to take a long time to get to that speed. Fighters will always, a lower mass ship will also have greater delta V, the ability to change its speed and course than a big ship. But speed itself, not necessarily the defining factor. And modern naval combat is all missiles over the horizon, not close-up gun battles. That hasn't been the case for 50 years, 60 years, has it, since the battleship died to death? Lovely old, big battleships chucking shells at each other. I mean, that doesn't happen anymore. It used to. at the early part of the 20th century, but that's naval warfare is long gone. So I think where are you and where do I need to be to aim my weapons to where you're going to be? I think that's much more about it. And if you can hide behind a rock, or you can obfuscate your location, or you can decoy your location by flares or by highly reflective things that you can drop out the back of your ship, so that you can confuse the enemy as to your actual position. And then you can make yourself go as cold as possible, so maybe you can just sneak past. All those dynamics. I think stealth or attempts at decoying and stealth in space are much more what space combat's going to be like than kind of pew 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 pew. So all that sort of thing is kind of how I see it. So I'm going to have a play around. I haven't really decided how I'm going to play those kind of things, but that's kind of more how I see it. One thing I do owe you guys is a discussion on sort of planet-killing weapons. We have done that before, but we will do it again. As in, and we'll go and have a think about that sort of thing as well. But I don't see. I mean, in the kind of thing that I want to provide. Again, going back to the narrative, what do I want my space fights to be about? Do I want sort of a mass fleet activity between opposing fleets? Is that something that would happen? Because again, you've got to a little bit of like modern warfare. I mean, a few people have made the point that modern warfare isn't about firing shells at enemy battleships anymore. It's all about missiles and electronic countermeasures and all that sort of stuff beyond the horizon. I think space combat's going to be more like that. It's going to be we're millions of kilometers away from the target. We don't see the target. If we're trying to destroy the target, we're trying to engage it from the maximum possible effective range so that we're in as little danger as possible. However, if we want to board the target, then that's different. Maybe we need to disable its engine so it can't maneuver, so therefore we know precisely where it is. If it does have any onboard defensive weaponry, we need to counter that somehow. And then if we want to board it, how do we board it? Do we connect up an airlock? What do we do? Because surely the people on board the ship don't want to be boarded. They're going to find ways to resist that boarding attempt. So there's all sorts of stuff there. I think it's quite interesting. So it's not going to be about pew pew, guns, X-wing fighters in space kind of stuff. It's much more about the mechanics of trying to maneuver through obviously three-dimensional space. There's lots of good military sci-fi out there which is believable, so I do want to kind of mine some of that thinking, try and make it my own, I think, but that sort of stuff is possible. Missiles as well. I mean, if you do want to destroy a target, a missile is a perfectly reasonable way of doing it, because all it needs to do is hit at high speed, and it's going to cause a serious amount of damage to the target. If you've got a 100-meter long spaceship and it gets hit by a meter-long missile travelling at a relative speed of several thousand kilometres per second, you're toast. Doesn't matter whether the missile has got a explosive warhead or not. It doesn't need one at that speed. And Nim Doskrin there, ironically, taking out the engines from afar will make it harder to find a ship as you've taken out its main heat source. Exactly, there's all sorts of issues like that. So I think it's all about that kind of almost space jousting. It's kind of what's the other guy doing? It's much more sort of almost submarine warfare in space. That feels to me more like the sort of combat that would actually occur. It's less airplanes in space. It's more submarines in space. That feels a bit more of the sort of thing that space combat would be like. A missile in space would likely not be a cylinder, because it doesn't need to be, of course. There's no aerodynamics they need to worry about. Like a sphere or a cube would probably be better. That's all you need. You just need something that can travel at really high speed in a direction that you can control. That's right. Rob's 2610. Jack Campbell describes battles in space, uses realistic physics, taking into account light travelling and how it dictates your perception of the battlefield. So that I think is very good, because you're looking at the battlefield through, particularly if the distances are big enough for the speed of light to have an appreciable difference. Which is if you're several million kilometres away from the target, you don't know where the target is. You only know where the target was at the time your last readout came through, which is limited by light speed, is data that's possibly 2 or 3 minutes old. Now, if the target is moving pretty fast, that makes for an interesting tactical game, doesn't it? Where the hell is he now? Where is he going to be at the point that I need to point my missiles at, or my gun at, or whatever it happens to be? I think that makes for very compelling storytelling if you can do it right. And he makes it more like sailing ships. You can see the enemy coming for days. So for example, go back to our original example. That's a very good point. If we start out with our enemies at Mars and we're at Earth, and so we're thrusting away from the Earth and they're thrusting away from Mars, our combined speeds are quite large. And so we can see that for several days, or certainly hours, depending on the type of drive, before we're in a position where either of us can engage. And then our relative closing speeds are really, really high. So what do we do? Do we flash past them at a really, really high rate of knots and leave a whole bunch of mines, hopefully in the direction that they're travelling, having known that they're probably doing the same thing to us? Or do we decelerate? Does that put us at a disadvantage? I don't know. All those sort of things. So that sort of dynamic is how I think space fights will actually happen in a plausible science fiction universe. Which is this sort of thing that I'm trying to aim for. And I do want to have the sort of tramp steamer style arrangement to the way the spaceships fly about. So I want there to be trading, and I want there to be piracy, and I want there to be bounty hunters and things like that around, but I do want them to act in a way that's sympathetic to that sort of model of space combat. So I need to have a think about how that stuff's going to work. So we should just repeal the speed of light. It's too darn inconvenient. It is a nuisance, isn't it? Rob's 2010, his battles come down to when do you time your final move? Too soon the enemy is ready, and too late you miss. And that's it, exactly. It's a fine balance, isn't it? Do you tip your hand early or not? Sounds like you want Elite. Well, you see, Elite there's lots of good stuff about lots and lots of science fiction domains that I want to play with. Now, Higara to me is going to be a blend of all my favourite things. Okay, so Elite, for example, the game that we shall not mention too much more. I like the tramp steamer model. Okay, it's in my head that can only happen for a brief period of time in the history of any universe. Now, it's quite acceptable to tell your story at a point in time where that's occurring. But if you think about the tramp steamer era on Earth, it was relatively short-lived. Okay, so what you're talking about here is small vessels going between ports carrying cargo. Okay, and they were on Earth. They were steamships, owner-operated steamships that kind of went between ports. And then you got all the kind of romancy bits of people jumping on and off these tramp steamers going between different ports. Now, that era only lasted for a few decades because it was superseded by new technology and economies of scale and changes in markets and all those sort of things. So it's attractive to have a tramp steamer style of space-faring commerce, but it simply wouldn't last very long. Okay, so what you see in things like Elite is totally artificial. You couldn't, the economies wouldn't sustain like that for long periods of time. Basically they would figure out a way of just doing bulk transports. You wouldn't need individual small ships because technology would supersede it. So so that sort of stuff, it could happen for a period of time, but it wouldn't happen for a long period of time, as it didn't on Earth. Tramp steamers are gone now. They don't exist. For very, very good reasons. And so if you're going to have that kind of construct in a science fiction universe, it has to have a historical context, I think. And I'm quite happy to have it with the knowledge that it didn't start very long ago and it probably won't last very long. So that just happens the story set in the time period where it does occur. Which is fine, but you have to then have some historical context either side of it to make it work in the timeline. So I'll work on that sort of thing, but I do want other things. So there's lots of sci-fi franchises which I really admire certain aspects of the storytelling. So, for example, the Homeworld series, where they discover weird and wacky ancient relics on a desert world. Love that idea. That's a really cool thing. I'd like to have some of that. So I'm quite inspired by all my favourite bits of all my different favourite science fiction franchises, and I will unashamedly borrow some of those as inspiration for my storytelling, because they're great set pieces to be able to tell a fun adventure story in. Shadewood is, again, for those of you who know, is very much inspired and a direct descendant of, dare I say it, things like Anne McCaffrey's Dragon series, because it's the same concept. Okay. For those of you who've read Anne McCaffrey's work, she wrote a series of books, the Dragon series, in which genetically engineered dragons live on a world that was populated by a high technology civilization. That something went wrong. The technological civilization shrank back away from the planet in question. The planet reverted to a feudal state and then slowly and steadily pulled itself back out of the abyss again. That's pretty much exactly what I did for Shadewood, because I found that idea compelling. Now, I haven't plagiarised Anne McCaffrey. I've not pinched any characters, I've not pinched any scenes, I've not pinched any direct things directly from her work at all, but I have certainly been inspired by that type of environment and gone, I'd like to write a story of that kind of type, which is what I did with Shadewood. Now, my space opera series is undoubtedly going to be inspired by all sorts of things, including space games, and other science fiction shows and sort of things, because that's the sort of, I'd love to write a story that's set in that kind of environment. So all sorts of things like that, the way that you riff off different ideas. Sounds like you're writing the story I'm trying to write now. Well, yeah, we all like sci-fi, right? We all like space opera and stuff. Serious question, says Rob 2016. Where is the line drawn between inspired by and copying? It must be difficult judgment. Well, I think you can be inspired by quite easily. So, for example, you can't copyright something like, this is a post-apocalyptic story. It's set after a nuclear war. Okay, that's been done many, many times by many, many people. They're not copying each other. They just happen to like that environment for telling stories. So the idea of saying, the first person to write a post-nuclear apocalyptic story, and nobody else can do that because it's been done. That's not something you can be accused of copying. You can be inspired. Yeah, that's the setting I want for my novel. So if that was the case, War of the Worlds would be the original novel, and something like, I don't know, Independence Day wouldn't be allowed because they'd say it was copying. That clearly isn't copying. That's inspired by it. It's an alien invasion story. Okay, you can change the details. So in H.G. Wells it was the Martians. In War of the Worlds it's some in Independence Day it's some alien race. In War of the Worlds it was set in Woking. That glorious epicentre of the UK. In Independence Day, it's mostly set in Los Angeles, I think, or New York or something. Mostly in America, with a few other European cities blown up just for good measure. It's not copying, okay, but it is inspired by, and you can see the influence. Okay, you can say, okay, well, yes, it's kind of retelling of H.G. Wells, but it isn't the same. It doesn't have the same set pieces. Doesn't have them in the same order. Those kind of things. I think where it gets a bit dodgy, if you wrote a space opera with laser swords and magic powers to manipulate things and space wizards, people would kind of probably raise a few eyebrows if you started doing that. Likewise, if you had a trek through the stars with a warp powered starship, I think that might start getting a little bit close to the line. But I think it's okay to be inspired by other works and to want to do something in a similar setting. But I think if you're going to do that, you need different characters, you need a different story, you need different set pieces, you need different tech. You need to make it your own. People can see the influences, but it's not the same story. You can say the same of things I've written. The Lords of Midnight, my fantasy novel, which obviously is based on a computer game. But that computer game was really a shameless copy of Lord of the Rings. So is that copying? It kind of is, but it's kind of not. It's there's subtleties in there. Obviously, you mustn't copy dialogue verbatim. You mustn't copy great tranches of text verbatim. That would definitely be copying. But it is a bit grey in the middle there. I think you do need to make sure you find your own voice, and you need to find your own descriptions and your own scenes and your own characters and your own, battles and all the other bits and pieces, sort of stuff. So it's a good question, Rob's 2610, but there's a sliding scale of answers. So I think a wise writer will basically try and be as different as possible, even if they're inspired by things. So there we go. Dunpeel 7830. Sorry, I'm back. I was just listening to your story, Evelyn's Light, and showing it with a few of my friends. Hopefully they enjoyed it. That's quite good. How about a ragtag fleet fleeing the the smile on tyranny? So don't pinch catchphrases from other shows. Don't boldly go where or anything like that. Don't use the force. Don't be the last best hope. Or anything like that. That's not good. And the problem with sci-fi is it's very hard to come up with the original content because there's so much has been done, and sci-fi. So it is, and it depends the sort of stories that you want to go. My view is that I can come up with something original because of the characters I put in it. That's where my originality comes from. I'm trying to capture stories of people living in interesting places like that. So my stories are always character driven because I think you've got an awful lot more variety with the characters than you can probably have with all the technology, and that's how I like to do it. You copy Clash of the Titans because that's got a priestess in it. Well, interesting enough, I mean, just going back to the topic of June, a few people basically read Shayward and said, is this sort of did you get that idea from June? And I was like, June? What are you talking about? And he said, well, they've got a bunch of high tech priestesses in June. The forget the name now. The Gezzerat, is that right? Can't remember. And I was like, oh yeah, they did, didn't they? But I hadn't consciously channeled June into Shayward at all. But now when you go back and look at it, you think, okay, well, there's a bunch of priestesses in June. Very, very powerful political structure, a matriarchy. You could argue, well, Dru just took that from the Ben Gesserit. There we are, the Ben Gesserit. Dru just pinched that for Shayward and changed it, and I actually didn't. I just liked the idea of a matriarchy as a kind of protagonist force in my stories, and that's what I used. Any similarities to any person's living or dead or make believe in other science fiction shows is entirely coincidental. So I didn't even deliberately do that, and you can be accused of, oh well, yeah, I know where you get that from, and he's like, I didn't actually, genuinely, honestly didn't, but I can see the similarities, and they were called the witches, so it's like, and I called mine the witches as well. It's like, so there are problems like that. It is hard to be entirely original, but I think it's okay to mix and match from things that have gone before, as long as you don't blatantly copy it. And the Red Wedding. I mean, there's a classic one. Rob 2016. You're quite right. I wrote a scene in my Elite book, Elite Reclamation, where basically there's this wedding, and everybody gets slaughtered. Well, apart from the main heroine. She's the only one that kind of gets away, and actually she doesn't even get away either. She gets killed as well, but that's spoilers if you haven't read that story. Anyway, so there's this wedding, right, and everybody gets killed. Lots of blood and people getting shot to pieces. Now I wrote that without having seen or read the Red Wedding from George R.R. Martin's books, okay, and it wasn't until quite a long time afterwards that I was watching Game of Thrones and they came up on the Red Wedding and thought, oh my god, everyone's going to assume I've copied that. Oh, Dru just ripped off the Red Wedding in his Elite book. And I genuinely didn't do that. But I was watching afterwards thinking, nobody's ever going to believe that, because of course I've written it chronologically after George R.R. Martin wrote that scene. So sometimes writers can come up with the same idea independently. It's just one of those things. So are you are you aware Frank Herbert, Isaac Asimov, and others formed a group? We shall not do Star Wars back in '97. Yes, I had come across that. Well, Isaac Asimov basically said he watched Star Wars and quite enjoyed it, and then he said I watched Battlestar Galactica, and he said, nah, it's once is enough. So all that sort of thing. So there is inevitably. I mean, it's space with spaceships, right? There's inevitably going to be things that are the same. I think if you can find your own spin on things, that's a good thing to do. Other authors, you'll have to buy my book. So Drew, here's exactly what happens. Oh, spoilers, by the way. Well, I haven't written this one yet, so I don't even know. I wonder how many wedding massacres are there. Well, you see, the thing is, Kelly Bank, that's a good point, because it's a good. I mean, not that I'm suggesting that weddings are a good place to kill people, but it's kind of, it's good for the shock value, isn't it? Which is probably why I came up with the idea, because actually in Elite Reclamation, the heroine is not her wedding. She's the third sister, and she just turns up at the wedding, and she's kind of bored, and she doesn't really want to be there, so she's not really paying attention. And suddenly all mayhem breaks loose. She has to sort of dump into action. So all that sort of stuff. And there are commonalities. I mean, Halo, for example, borrows heavily from Isaac Asimov and David Niven and all those kind of things. So, who was first with those ideas? It's very tough to say. So I think that's and plenty of celebration massacres. See, that's another thing. You can go back to original. Greek myths and all sorts of things, and just pinch ideas directly from them, and other people will have done the same thing. So then obviously your stories have a lot of similarities. I mean, Star Wars, the original Star Wars, is just a Greek myth with spaceships and laser swords, really. It's the classic hero's adventure. He saves the girl and he defeats the Dark Lord, and against incredible odds always prevails. It's classic storytelling. So is it any different? All that sort of stuff. So there we go. Does that help? I don't know. Those are the sort of things that I'm wrestling with as I'm putting together my own science fiction series. So it's stuff that happened. It's stuff that goes on. So I will investigate these ads. This is annoying. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there. I'll see if I can get them switched off somehow. Something's obviously been switched on again, which is really annoying. So leave that with me. I'll investigate and make sure they don't come up again. So something funny's happened there. But anyway, it is time for me to depart. So enjoy the ads, and then when you come back on, I'll be going bye. So apologies for that. I will investigate why the ads are switched on. So there we go. Jan has had the same ad twice in a row. That's just so annoying. So I don't know what Twitch has done. I hope they haven't switched this on permanently. So I'll go and investigate and see if I can switch it off, whatever's been enabled. But anyway, lovely to have you all on board again once more. Thank you very much for joining my writing streams. It's always good fun to talk to you, and we will continue to write on as always. So that'll be good. Be good, my friends. I will see you soon. Have a fantastic week ahead. Look after yourselves. See you on Thursday for some No Man's Sky, of course, and we should be back on Saturday for some more retro Wing Commander 2 and go on from there. So there we go. Right, be good. Take care, my friends. See you soon.